Hello and welcome to Haunted Montreal's Spooky Story Sessions. I'm your host, Holly Rhiannon, and today I'm going to tell you all about the old Pointe Hotel. Here at Haunted Montreal, we bring you ghost stories in both English and French every Saturday. Before we get into today's story, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you get notified each time we've got a new tale to share. And hey, if you're already subscribed, a big thank you and welcome back. We're so happy to have you. Now, without further ado, let's get spooky. In the heart of Pointe Claire village sits a rambling old structure which currently houses a bar known as Le Pionnier. The building was originally a bustling hotel that hosted travelers passing through the village or merchants coming to conduct trade. While the hotel has changed hands and names over the decades, one thing remains constant. The old building is rumored to be haunted. Pointe Claire is a sleepy and bucolic suburb on Montreal's West Island. The municipality gets its name from the fact that the clear point of land juts out into the lake. Before colonization, this treeless point was used by various First Nations as a stopover and unobstructed place to survey conditions of the lake. The French colonization started in 1642 with the fortified settlement of Ville-Marie in what is now Old Montreal. The name Pointe Claire first appears on the map in 1686. Strategically located on the shore between Lachine and the rapids in Sainte-Anne-de-Bellevue, French settlers chose Pointe Claire as a place to test out the colonial concept of the seigneurie. In a nutshell, long rectangles of land were granted to colonists by the King of France, developed by farmers and overseen by a feudal lord known as a seigneur. In 1684, a colonist named Pierre Cabassier received the first grant of land under this seigneurial system in what is now the municipality of Pointe Claire. Pointe Claire developed into a village during the New France era and was characterized by its windmill erected in 1709 on the breezy treeless point. A sturdy structure that both ground wheat into flour and provided a form of defense during the early wars between French colonizers and the First Nations being colonized. The windmill is still perched on the point. The first presbytery was built nearby in 1705, and the first church in Pointe Claire was erected on the site in 1713. It was a rudimentary stone structure with a cemetery, including a section for children. Interred there is Louise, the 14-month-old daughter of Canada's first female saint, Marguerite de Youville. She was buried in the Children's Cemetery on March 1st, 1729. As the village grew, the church was replaced in 1746 with a larger version. After the British conquered New France and took over Montreal Island in 1760, more commerce began to spring up in the village, including hotels and inns. This caused tension with religious authorities. In response, plans were announced to expand the church site in 1848. Famous architect Victor Bourgeot was hired to draw up blueprints for a new church. During these planning stages, in 1857, the church's cemetery ran out of space. That July, Curé Monsieur Pominville wrote a letter of complaint to Montreal Bishop Ignace Bouget. The curé lamented that 4 licensed innkeepers had set up near the church. He also expressed dismay that with the cemetery full, it was necessary to bury the dead under the church. As written by the curé, the floor lies on the bare earth, so each time there is a burial, they are obliged to remove the pews, which has caused the flooring to deteriorate in a very short time, and also damages the pews. He bemoaned that the large number of bodies interred in the church over the last few years has become dangerous to public health. Efforts were made to improve the site with a building spree. A new convent was erected in 1868. The new St. Joachim Church opened on Easter Sunday in 1881, but promptly burned down a few days later. A fire erupted in the attic of the old church on April 17th, and the flames, fanned by strong winds, destroyed both structures. Townspeople valiantly fought to save the other buildings, and a pious young man named Daoust was burned alive while trying to protect the presbytery. The final version of the St. Joachim Church, still standing today, was erected in 1885. Furthermore, a new cemetery was consecrated along the eastern and northeastern side of the new church on land purchased from the nuns of the Notre Dame congregation. 1885 also saw a dispute between religious authorities and the nearby Hotel Bergevin, located just to the east of the new church. A rowdy and popular inn that had served as a stopover point for merchants crossing the river to trade, it was considered an embarrassment by church officials. Parish priest Father Laberge felt that having an alcohol-fueled hotel near the church was unacceptable. To resolve the problem, parish elders and the curé approached the owner, Dr. Roddick, and offered to buy it. In 1896, the Hotel Bergevin was sold and converted into a religious boys' school called Académie des Frères de Saint-Joseph. Shades of Villa Maria here. Burials continued in the new cemetery for decades until it was too full in 1946. The cemetery was decommissioned, and from 1948 to 1954, all visible remains were removed, including tombstones, crosses, fences, and pathways. Around 50 skeletons were dug up and moved to a new cemetery on St. John's Boulevard, leaving the graves of approximately 5,000 of Pointe Claire's ancestors unmarked. Today, there is nothing whatsoever to commemorate the presence of this historic burial ground. Just up the street from St. Joachim Church is Le Pionnier, the site of the haunting. Located on Lot 64, the rambling building was constructed as a hotel in 1900 following a fire that destroyed half of Pointe Claire village. Previously, the site was used for innkeeping and housed another hotel, thought to have been built in the 1880s. The Pointe Claire Hotel changed hands many times over the years and was often renamed after the proprietor, such as Charlebois, Richner, or Chenier. The hotel business dried up in the 1960s, and the enterprise began to develop a worrisome reputation as more and more people drank alcohol there. The place had become run down and shabby and began catering to a more and more shady clientele. In order to accommodate a serious drinking establishment, in the 1970s the hotel closed and the building was renovated. The first floor became a bar and a restaurant exclusively, while the second floor was converted into a mezzanine with a bar and pool tables. Only the third floor was left untouched. The legendary Pionnier opened its doors and was soon known as a criminal hangout frequented by motorcycle gangs. During the late 1970s, a woman was working at the Pioneer on the second floor mezzanine. Her shift finished at around 4 or 5 in the morning after the customers had gone home and accounting was tallied. Part of her duty was to deposit various things in the owner's offices on the third floor. She hated going upstairs because the atmosphere on the third floor was so completely opposite to the fun and good-natured havoc of the bars below. It was an oppressive feeling, like you were being watched by someone very close. After several disturbing incidents on the third floor, the woman began trying to avoid going there, instead sending gullible new employees to carry out the various tasks. According to the woman, the first incident happened shortly after she was hired. She had to bring some paperwork up to the office. Walking up the stairs, she felt like someone was behind her the whole time. It felt like it, but it wasn't possible. The stairs were very narrow and she was absolutely alone. Upon reaching the third floor, she walked down the hallway. The floor was oppressive and had a very unpleasant odor due to age and neglect. She placed the papers on the desk and turned around to see someone hurrying past the doorway. It was only a couple steps away, but when she reached the hall, there was no one in sight. There was no sound of anyone walking back down the stairs, and all the doors to the other rooms on the floor were closed. Plus, someone opening or closing the door would have been heard, and she heard nothing. She was, to say the least, creeped out and virtually bolted down the stairs. After this incident, the woman desperately tried to avoid going up the stairs again, so this is when she began to send new employees instead. However, it wasn't long before these new employees wised up and began to refuse her requests, explaining that they were too busy. The very topic of the third floor became taboo, and no one wanted to discuss it. The woman soon had no choice but to go up to the creepy offices herself again. She explained that the second incident occurred about a month after the first. Again, she had to bring something upstairs, perhaps her tape from the night's sales. Regardless, up she went again. Again, she felt if she was not alone, and apparently she wasn't. She was in the office, perhaps putting her tape in an envelope, when someone put their hand on her back. Her boyfriend at the time also worked at the bar, so she figured it was him. But she was wrong. As she turned around to give him hell for creeping up on her, there was no one there. She took off through the doorway and saw a dark shape move right through one of the closed doors. That was the last time she ever agreed to go up to the 3rd floor again. Not exactly thrilled with her haunted work environment, the woman eventually quit entirely. Decades later, however, the same woman found herself visiting the drinking establishment. She struck up a conversation with her waitress and began to compare the old days with the new. When the topic of the 3rd floor came up, the waitress was eager to discuss it. When asked if she had ever experienced anything spooky, the waitress recalled that once she had gone upstairs for some supplies, and when she reached the top of the stairs, she saw the shadow of someone entering a room. She approached and quickly realized that the door to the room which the shadow had entered was closed. Confused, she carried on to the supply room to finish up her task. As she was opening a box, she felt someone lurking behind her. She spun around and saw a dark form wavering in the doorway. The terrified waitress began to back away, but stumbled and fell over a box as the shadowy form continued to come into the room. The waitress feared that the apparition would advance on her, but instead, it turned and proceeded to walk through the wall, as apparitions do. The waitress also mentioned that she was not alone, and that other coworkers had also experienced similar inexplicable occurrences on the 3rd floor. In January of 1995, the business was cleaned up and temporarily named Clyde's. A staff member who worked there at the time recalls rumors that people had died in the building during its days as a hotel. She explained that she heard all of the stories of how it used to be a hotel and all the weird, creepy things, and that it was haunted by people who had died there, which is not surprising as it was built in the late 19th century. Saying that, she used to work in the early mornings cleaning up the place, which always kind of creeped her out. Not for any particular reason other than her fear. But the one place where she really felt inexplicably uneasy was upstairs, especially on that walk up the stairs to the top floor. She did not like it. And then there was a room or two to the left of the hallway when she arrived upstairs that she always got a very bad vibe from. In her recollections, she added that it creeps her out just thinking about it now. It was a place where you just knew that something had happened there. What it was, she couldn't be sure, but it resulted in a very uneasy feeling. Well, nobody knows exactly who or what is haunting the Pointe Claire Hotel. The most common theory is related to the nearby church site and cemetery. Because religious authorities historically opposed any drinking establishments near the church, there is speculation that the boozy Pointe Claire Hotel may have offended the clergy and pious churchgoers with its endless partying. It was not uncommon for drunken revelers to offend the village's residents with unsavory behavior. In fact, to this day, the Pointe Claire Public Security Force is made busy keeping bar patrons in check and trying to prevent uncivilized incidents, such as public urination, excessive noise-making, getting overly romantic on the site of the old cemetery, which is now a nondescript field. Generally speaking, the dead do not like to be disrespected. The fact that Pointe Claire's original cemetery was abandoned and forgotten may not bode well for those who were buried there, especially for heroes like the pious young man Daoust, who perished in the 1881 fire protecting the presbytery. With all the tombstones removed, memories have faded and important people have been forgotten. When one adds this to the nearby location of the rowdy old Pointe Claire Hotel and its misbehaving clientele, it's easy to see why the dead might be upset. Could the shadowy apparition that terrifies staff on the 3rd floor be someone who died in the hotel? Could it be the ghost of Daoust, or some other person who was buried in the nearby cemetery? While these are certainly feasible explanations, because of the shadowy nature of the spirit, it's impossible to tell who or what it is at the time of this video. It makes sense that the forgotten dead, already displeased with the erasure of their cemetery and endless partying at the nearby bar, might return to haunt the old Pointe Claire Hotel to discourage this behavior. Perhaps only future encounters between the mysterious shadow and bar staff will help shed more light on this strange haunting. But for now, that's where we leave it. Are you a Montreal resident or a tourist who has had a strange experience at this location? If so, we would love to know. We always want to hear your theories about what could be going on. Thank you so much for stopping by. If this is your first video, we hope that you'll stick around for the next one. We put out videos in both French and English every Saturday. If you'd like to learn more about the organization founded by Donovan King, it's all listed in the description down below. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment. We'll have a new video out next Saturday. But until then, stay spooky.